into the washroom to do all the rituals to make sure that you sanitize yourself before you do anything else in the house. So certainly, I think this is something that all of us are concerned about. And I want to go straight into this webinar so that we manage the time well. So there are going to be two parts to this session today. One is to understand the nature of our fears and anxiety, and one of the things you will hear me talk about is the fact that what keeps us human are our emotions. Yeah, and if you don't, the point is not to remove these fears and anxiety, because this is what keeps us human. The emotions that come with fear and anxiety are also happiness, joy, love. All of those are important emotions. So it's not just a question of just removing one fear, emotions that we are uncomfortable with, and only embrace some other parts of us. So that's not how it works. But the important thing is knowing how to normalize this, yeah, because we've always lived with this, and this is part of our whole psychological makeup as human beings, yeah. And the other part then, of course, is learning how to manage these fears and anxieties, not just from a personal perspective, but also from a community, family community, as well as an organizational perspective, if we have time to look at some of those areas. So let me go straight into this, yeah. And as Raymond said, as I'm going through this, please do start, writing down some of your questions that you might have, so that at different times of the webinar, so that it's a bit more interactive, I'll open the floor for some question and answers. Yeah. So the first part is trying to understand our fears and anxiety. Before we can manage, you need to understand what is it that we are dealing with. What is this process that happens to us that raises a sense of fear and anxiety within us. Yeah. So let's try to understand this first, and I'll give some psychological foundations to where fears, where feelings and emotions come from. Let me begin by talking about the state of play. And this is something that you see every day. You turn on any social media, turn on any channel on our news, and this is all they do. Whether I watch CNN, whether it's NBC, CNA, Channel News Asia, you go on your chat group, constantly 24-hour barrage of news. And sometimes, how the news is reported, and it's very dramatic. How these news readers are very dramatic. Or so many deaths today in the city of New York, as if the end of the world is happening. But this is the state of play. Yeah. As of yesterday, 1.7 million plus people who have confirmed cases worldwide, and these are only those that they have been tested. Of that, you get about 6% of that that have experienced that. Even one death is a death too much, but you have 6% of the people who have contracted the virus who have actually succumbed to this. Yeah, so certainly this is real. The fears that we have of contracting it is real, because even though over 90% survive, often we miss out that important data. But just knowing that 5-6% people succumb to the virus and can die, that certainly increases the sense of fear of contracting the virus. Yeah. On top of it, we also have news like this. Whenever you go out, you are even though you're really out there because you have to get essential goods. Yeah, you have to go to the market, you have to go to the grocery store, you have to go down the pharmacy to get some things, and there's a roadblock, and you're playing this script in your head. What if I'm stopped? What do I say to the policeman? Anytime, Malaysian society, you see a roadblock, some people, get more anxious, and especially if you don't drive, right, and you are dependent on your spouse to be the one driving, and your spouse is someone in a high-risk group, so you have two people in the car. And that's a violation of the MCO, because they say only one driver at a time, right? And so you have all of these things that play on in your head. What do we say? And on top of it, if you get reprimanded, it can be quite humiliating. So this certainly adds on. Yeah, this certainly adds on to how we feel about this current situation. Yeah, and so yes, so we try to stay at home. We try to study, try to work. We comply with the MCO. But the reality is we are social beings. right? And often reporters ask me, so what is it like, with the social distancing? How does it impact on us? And the truth is, it does impact on us. Yeah. Mental health risks of living in a confined space over a prolonged period of time. You have a lot of studies that show this. Fatigue, burnout. Some of the studies are done on astronauts who live in space in the space station over a prolonged period of time. Isolation, loneliness, mood disorders, sleep quality gets affected. Some of us who run businesses, when you don't get enough sleep, suddenly that impacts on your decision-making process. Then because you don't sleep, you feel very lethargic. You don't do your exercise as you normally would, walking about. Even if you don't consciously do a lot of this, but in the workplace, because you're active, you're moving about, at least you make up your 5,000 steps a day. Yeah, but now you don't, and then we eat, we work in front of our laptops, we watch TV. We don't do that exercise, and of course, poor cardiovascular functions and other kinds of physical problems set in, and then on top of it, not enough sleep when you're under a lot of stress, impaired immunity, make us more susceptible to any kind of illnesses, virus-bound illnesses that come to us. So, yes, stay at home, but even staying at home has got risks if this is over a prolonged period of time. Yeah. So we have to do something about it because this is the new normal, as we said at the start of this, and we certainly can do something about it so that what happens to us is not something that is out of our control. We are very much still in control of the circumstances that we find ourselves in, even in this restricted, limited space that we find ourselves in. Let me just also add, one of the interesting quotes that I read just a few days ago was something by H.P. Lovecraft. Yeah, oldest and strongest emotion of mankind is fear, and the oldest and strongest kind of fear is this fear of the unknown. Yeah, so not sure what's going to happen after April 28, whether it'll be extended for another 2 weeks. In my line of work as CEO of our international schools, it's a conversation that I have constantly, because we have to plan how long more do we continue this online learning for our schools, just to make sure that our students are not impacted. Yeah, but it is just equally stressful for teachers having to do online teaching and learning, because they themselves have families. Yeah, and I know many of my teachers who, as they are trying to help their own students in school, they've got their children in the background who are also learning from other teachers from other schools. Yeah, so it is certainly a challenging period of time, and so this fear of uncertainty is something, those of you who are in business, this is a reality. Every day we are talking about how do we innovate, how do we start reimagining a different kind of business. Yeah, because if this continues and many people are already badly impacted economically, all different kinds of countries have come up with different stimulus packages that will just keep the economy going. Because many people are going to be losing their jobs. Many people are going to go out of business. So the fear of the unknown, the fear of the future, that certainly compounds and adds on to the current situation that we are in. And therefore, it makes sense to talk about this and to understand the nature of fear in our lives. Yeah. So how do we cope? How do we cope? And as I said before, we learn how to cope. We need to understand where these fears come from. Okay, so let me begin, just to give you an overview. And these are things I teach. I'm a cognitive behavior psychologist, and I operate from a model where our thoughts influence the way we feel, and certainly impacts on our physiological aspects, our physical well-being, as well as impacts on what we do. So there certainly is a connection with our feelings, our thoughts, our emotions, and our physiology. Yeah, so just bear this in mind. And I'll lead you through some process, of understanding this. Okay, so let me begin with this first sentence, and this next slide is a very important slide for us to understand our emotions a bit better, and a lot of our strategies will come back to this slide. Yeah, people react to events in terms of the meaning they give to events. People react to events in terms of the meanings they give to events. I'll explain that in a minute. And the special meaning that we give determines the emotional response. Okay? So when things happen in our lives, we can't run away from the fact that because we are human beings, we will process that event as part of what we call sensation and perception. And then we give meaning. We look at the event, then we have to try to understand before we respond to that event. But in the process of responding, something will happen to us emotionally. So let me ask you some questions and you can answer this in your own minds. Write it down if you want. I'm going to take time asking this question, yeah? And you answer it in your mind. If you do want to share some of these things, you can write down in the chat forum and pass it to Raymond. Okay, so think of the last time when you felt happy. When was the last time you felt happy? Even in the last 1 month when we had to experience this sense of being enclosed, living in enclosed spaces. When was the last time you actually felt happy? What was the thought? What was it that you think made you happy? What happened that made you happy? Now, next question. Think of the last time when you felt sad. What happened? What made you sad? Okay, so number 1, what made you happy? Number 2, what made you sad? Number 3, think of the last time you felt anxious. Was it when you went out to get your grocery shopping during MCO? And somebody, handled some things. Everybody now is in face masks and someone was just too close to you. Yeah, you touched the railing of some place and you forgot whether you sanitized your hand before you touch your face. What was it that made you feel anxious or fearful? Yeah. What happened? And finally, when was the last time you felt angry? What was the situation that you experienced that made you feel angry? So just 4 scenarios, huh? What made you happy? What made you sad? What made you fearful or anxious? And what made you angry? Okay, so remember, we respond to things because of the specific meanings we give to events that happen outside of us. And sometimes this happens very, very fast and we don't even realize we've actually given a meaning to that event. And then, but what we do realize is that we have an emotional response that comes from this. So now let's try to slow down a little bit and go back to where the origins of the feelings come from. Okay, they all come from our thinking. So think about when the last time you felt happy. I'm not a fortune teller. I'm not mind reading. Yeah. But chances are that you felt happy because the event that you experienced was something that you perceived as adding to your life. An event, but the meaning that you gave was the event added to your life. So wherever you see your situation is, that specific instance, whether it was a child coming up to you to say, "Good morning, mommy, I love you." Whether it was your student or a parent, if you're a teacher, who wrote into you and said, "Thank you for all the hard work. I really appreciate this." And feeling elated because why? You perceive that the meaning you give to that positive affirmation, the positive stroke that the person gave to us was something that added to your life that day. And that's why we feel happy. The meaning we give to that response from people, to that thing that was happening outside of us. When was the last time you felt sad? And sad is directly related to a thought that equals to loss. When you feel a loss of something, when you heard the news that someone contracted the virus, when someone that you knew died from the virus. Yesterday, a colleague of mine shared on our common chat room that she had lost a mentor, someone she looked up to. very distinguished judge who helped her and mentored her during her early years as a young lawyer. That sense of loss, someone who was close to me, I have lost that person. And of course, very natural to feel sad, right? So sadness happens because there's a specific thought in my mind that says, I have lost something, and therefore I feel this sense of loss. I feel sad. And when do we feel angry? Before I come to anxious. So the next time you feel angry, don't look outside of yourself, right? Don't tell your child, your wife, your friend, your colleague, your family members, your relatives, you made me feel sad. No, it doesn't work that way, right? We feel angry because of a perception, a thought in our minds that happen, that when we perceive someone as impinging, violating, trampling on something that is important to us. So if something that is important to us is what we call a value, yeah. So if I value respect, if I value my own personal space, if I value kindness, consideration, and when I see a member of my family acting in a way that violates this value, yeah, my child who doesn't lift a finger to help, of course, then I feel angry. I'm already so stressed, so tired. Why are you not helping? So of course I get angry, right? I work so hard as a teacher to prepare my lessons, and I get this very nasty letter from a parent that you're not doing enough. Your online learning sucks, right? So of course, natural reaction is not just sadness because you feel a sense of loss from all that work that you have done, but a sense of anger because you value appreciation and someone did not appreciate you, right? And therefore the sense of anger. You were online all this time and your principal comes up to you and says, where were you? Where were you? I got a complaint that you were not there. And then of course the sense of that value. I'm an honest person. I was there. I just had to log off for 2 seconds because I had to also rush to the toilet before I came back. And it just so happened at that time, this parent logged on. And of course, you didn't see me there. You logged on, you didn't see me there. It didn't mean I was missing in action. I was there, but I just had to go off, because I really had to go to the toilet at that point. And so when you value honesty and someone questions that honesty, then natural to feel anger because your perception is someone has violated this sense that is this value that is important to me. And therefore, the last one, why do we feel anxious? Why do we feel fear? And the cognition, the thinking that links directly with our feelings of fear and anxiety is because when we perceive something as a threat to my physical or psychological well-being, a threat to me or to a significant other in my life. So when I see something as a threat, so the virus is a threat. 24 hours of the day, we are reminded of the threat. Every time we go out, we are reminded of the threat. Every time we touch things, we are reminded of the threat. Every moment of the day, we are reminded of the threat. And not just the threat, but the threat equals death. We are reminded of the fact that I might ultimately die from contracting the virus. So of course, then this sense of anxiety, this fear builds up. Yeah, so understand this. So this next slide, therefore, point 3 and point 4. The nature of a person's emotional response depends on whether he perceives the event of adding happiness, subtracting loss, sadness, endangering, the threat, which is what anxiety is about, impinging on my personal domain, my self-concept, or my values. That means you're trampling on things that are important to me. And that's the reason why I feel this. This is what makes us, again, as I say, this is what makes us human, right? And so it's important that we understand that the emotions we have are very much linked to the thoughts that begin this process of us feeling the way we feel. This is what we call it in cognitive theory, cognitive specificity. That means for every emotion, there is a specific stream of thought that happens. And the next time you have any kind of emotional response, the starting point for us should be, what is it that I perceive? What is the meaning that I've given to this event? Yeah, that is making me feel this way. So then I can change my thought. Because if the thought comes from me, then I am in control of my thoughts, not the people outside of me. I am in control of the meaning that I give to an event that happens outside of me. Okay, so then I don't have to react, respond in a personal way that then damages, makes the situation worse in my home at this very, very stressful time already. Just living in an enclosed space and then living with all the conditions of the MCO, etc., and all of the environmental dangers that impact on us every moment of our day is already stressful enough, right? And so understanding my emotions, by understanding my thought process that leads to my emotions, will then help me behave differently, because my emotions will lead me to behave. So the word emotions come from the Latin emotare, E-motare, emotare, which means implied in every emotion is the desire to act. Yeah, E, action. Yeah, so M, action. If you look at the word emotion, you will see the word action. So every emotion will move us to act. So when I'm happy, what will my body will respond in a certain way, my heart will start pumping, etc., etc., to go and hug the person. But nowadays it may be more difficult to hug someone outside of the family. Yeah, but to reach out in some way to show appreciation. If I'm sad, then I will withdraw. If I'm anxious, it's the same thing. Yeah, that the heart will pump in a certain blood to certain parts of my frame, my body, more to my legs for fight or flight. Yeah. And if I'm angry, then my hands feel very strong. That's why road rage happens. Yeah, the heart will pump blood to the hands to pick up the certain things and to lash out at other people. Yeah. So every time there's an emotion, the body will respond in a certain way that will move us to act. So our thoughts, our emotions, our bodily reactions, and our behaviors will follow. So that's why it's so important to understand how to manage our thought processes. Because if we allow our thoughts to overwhelm us, in specifically when it comes to fears and anxiety, we become paralyzed. We are not able to move or to respond or to act, and that then leads to a spiral of events that happen in our lives that then just go into something what we call mood disorders. Yeah, so not all anxiety, not all every time that when you feel fear or anxiety, normal. Huh? So we just need to learn to respond normally, to know what is normal and what is not normal. And what is not normal are things like this. Yeah, when we start having feelings from a behavior perspective, when too much news either makes us suffer from some of these behaviors, where we cannot stop obsessing about the news all the time. We are just following every bit of news, every channel that is there, everything that's online. We are just obsessing about this. Um, when you um, start losing appetite over this, or eating excessively just to cope with the anxiety, or you can't sleep, those are behaviors that are that will indicate to you that something happening in your life that is not so healthy, and that's something that you need to talk about with a professional, right? um, Physical symptoms, when you start noticing shortness of breath, heart palpitations, tense muscle, dizziness, cold sweats, all of those are indicators of what we call the onset of a panic attack. Yeah, but it could also be that you might be getting a heart attack. So just because I put those things there under anxiety, it doesn't mean that it is just anxiety. So you just need to monitor those physical symptoms and check with your doctor whether there's anything else that is happening to you other than a psychological problem that might be happening, right? And emotionally, when you start feeling a range of feelings that are more intense than usual, feelings of fear, restlessness, uneasiness, worry, irritability, not yourself, people even comment, "Mommy, what's happened to you? Papa, how come you seem so, little bit, I don't know what to say. I say, hi, good morning. You say, what's so good about this morning?" Yeah, we are all enclosed up, and you get worked up, little things. I don't know what to say to you anymore, because it just seems I'm walking on eggshells whenever I'm around you. Yeah. And cognitively, yeah, we start, we continue to just ruminate, become preoccupied about thoughts of the virus. Everything is all about the virus. We eat, live, and breathe virus. Yeah, virus related news. And that's how people develop OCD. What is OCD? Obsessive compulsive disorders. Yeah. So there are two parts of OCD: the obsession, which is basically our thoughts. So you just wash your hands. You did the usual, dance routine with washing the hands, right? And it took you 20 seconds, 30 seconds to do all of that washing, and you've done all the necessary things. But before that, you had already wiped down everything in your house. Then after you did that, you went to your living room and you touched something. I said, "Ah, yeah, did I wash my hands nicely? Did I wipe down this nicely?" Then you go back and you do the whole routine all over again. And throughout the day, that's all you do, the same routine. Because the thought, the obsession, did I? Yeah. You locked up the house, then you go to your room, then you come back. Did I lock up the house? Did I miss something? Then you go and check again. That's why people with OCD, yeah, when the thoughts keep coming in, keep intruding into our consciousness, then the compulsion, that's the behavior. We are compelled to respond to those thoughts. That's why they call it a disorder, because we don't know how to manage those thoughts, the obsessive thoughts that come in. And that's what we need to be mindful about. Yeah. Not allowing our thoughts to become so much a part of reality that we don't have balance anymore in our lives, with other thoughts that also are important, that we need to pay attention to. Okay. So hopefully that has made some sense to you in terms of where our thoughts of fear and anxiety come from. But when you think about it, what's the worst that can happen? Let's just say, even if we contract this, and I don't want to sound flippant here. I am just, again, very mindful that these fears are real. Okay, because when you look at the stats, it's real. Huh? But think about our life before COVID-19. And think about what is happening to us now. Our life before COVID-19 was, we all knew this for a fact, at some point, at some level of consciousness, and sometimes we are reminded about it more often than not when certain events happen before COVID-19. Before COVID-19, the threats to our well-being was always there. We always knew that at some point or another in our lives, we would die. It's not a question if we will die, it's when we will die, right? When you drive, get in your car every morning on the way to work, that could be the last time you drive to work. The threat out there on Malaysian roads when it comes to driving is serious. That's why every year during Hari Raya, during Chinese New Year, they have Cup, right, to bring down zero tolerance for deaths. But every year you see the numbers very difficult to manage. Every time we go on holidays, during the festive season, the number of deaths on the Malaysian roads, every day the number of accidents that we have on the road that cripple people, that reality is there. Every day when we are walking, anything can happen to us. We cross the road, we get knocked down by a car. We are having a meal, and in the middle of it, we get a stroke. How many people do we know have suffered from sudden attacks, heart attacks, or strokes in the middle of a normal work day? People who are close to us. I know so many of my relatives and friends. My own father died that day. My mother had a stroke in the middle of the day. So the threat to our lives has always been there. But we don't go up every morning, getting up in the morning, I'm going to die. we don't get up every morning fearing that this is the end of my life. We don't occupy our thoughts with the fact that we are going to die every morning. Yeah, because we get on with life. We know that we are going to die some point or another, but it's there at the back of our mind, and sometimes you hear news of somebody who passed away, and then we are reminded, and in our spiritual moments, we thank God for the life that He has given us, and we move on, right? And that is what is different. That's why we could deal with our mortality better before COVID-19 because we don't think about it so often. The difference now is constant, as I said, constant. At every meeting that we are involved in, at every moment of our lives, this is constant, either at a personal, familiar, societal level, where we talk about, CEOs talk about how do we re-strategize, to deal with this, and always constant, whether it's physical debt or organizational business debt. Now, the only thing that comes died, Malaysians say die, 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 die lah, die, die. So we're constantly reminded of this, right? And when there's too much anxiety, when there's too much stress, does that have an effect on us, right? And the answer obviously is yes, it will have. How do we know this? We know this from studies of stress, hundreds and hundreds of studies. We've not only studied human beings, we've also studied animals who go through stress, yeah? And I'll show you another experiment that, a classic experiment that they do on what we call the general adaptation syndrome. So we know that stress is not necessarily a bad thing, right? A lot of times people ask us to give stress management courses and talks. Why? Because they are talking about something called distress. Stress is not necessarily a bad thing. From the Yerkes-Dodson law, you will see, looking at that graph that I'm just showing you, yeah, when stress is too low, there's no momentum to do anything. Some people are so cool, no stress in their lives. And their deadlines, c'est la vie, yeah. Do when you can do, what you can't do, don't do lah. Life happens. No stress, no motivation, right? So sometimes you have to, put a bit of carrot and stick. You have to say you get the thing down, or otherwise I'm going to fire you from the job, etc. Then stress. Your child who has to prepare for an exam coming up, yeah. Of course, there's stress, right? We've got a presentation happening. You're an Asian. Of course, there's stress. Yeah, I've got to make my numbers. Of course, there's stress. But the stress has to be at a certain level. That's what they call good stress or eustress, not useless. Eustress, 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 good stress. But you notice when this curve starts to go down and the stress level, that means if you move further to the right of the graph, when the stress is too high, performance on the left-hand side on the vertical will also drop. Yeah. So some stress is good, but we need to know how to manage that stress to the point that it doesn't overwhelm us, because then there will be effects on us physiologically. Yeah. They did this experiment on rats, putting them in a cage. It very seems inhuman, but sometimes the only way we understand our human responses to various kinds of things is when we do experiments on other life forms. And they put them in a cage, little electric shocks that they will send, them. And they realize that the body goes through different phases. And then when they match that against, human beings that go through very similar periods in their lives, they realize that when we are under stress, the body acts up. So initially, when we defend against this, we use whatever resources that we have to defend against this, because we are in what we call the alarm reaction, survival, to defend against whatever stresses that come our way. And so it does take a toll on us a little bit. But human beings are quite resilient, because we have this ability to reach deep within ourselves. We have resources. We find that, despite the initial tiredness, motivation, general on the field speaks to his troops, right? Come on, we can do this. Your CEO speaks to his, we can. People pull themselves up, then develop what we call a stage of resistance. The level of stress is just about right. The stage of resistance where the body tries to defend against and adapt to the new realities, right? But if these new realities extend indefinitely, and we haven't had the time to recharge, then what happens is we will reach the stage of exhaustion. no more resources left, no more ability to resist, and very, very quickly we succumb to the stress. And that's when people then suffer from depression, exhaustion, fatigue, and sometimes suicidal ideation and so forth. Yeah. So stress. I'm just careful of this term, using this phrase. Stress can lead to the possibility of eventual death. Yeah, on its own, because if people don't have the strengths and resources, it can. And that's why, and especially if we are more predisposed because of certain types of thought processes that have become very much entrenched, rooted within us. We tend to be more prone or susceptible to stresses compared to other people. People who are very, what we call type A, perfectionists. Yeah, high control of things. Everything has to be perfect. They are more prone, more inclined. When we are in a situation like this where the control is taken from us, so greater chance of them succumbing to stress levels. Yeah, and then, as I said, if you read up all of the literature on stress, that certainly has an effect on our immunity systems. Yeah, and it will make it more difficult for us to have our own body resistance to be able to fight the threat of the virus. Okay. Let me just stop here for a while, Raymond. Are there any questions that have come in before I go to part 2 of this talk, where now I begin to talk about some practical steps, suggestions as to how to deal with our fears and anxiety?
Yes, Dr. Jerry.
Yes,
I have, William here. I have here a parents called Farah who want to know any suggestion how to explain the new reality to their children. I think she wants them to be careful, but at the same time, not feeling too anxious and fear. Farah, you might want to unmute your mic and video so you can communicate with Dr. Jerry.
I have a little point further down the slides, William, Farah, where I will give an idea about how to keep our children calm, how to explain to them what is happening, right?
Yeah.
Without causing too much anxiety themselves. Yeah, because children obviously will be asking, why can't I go out and play with my friends? Why do I have to stay stuck inside here, right? And so how do we educate them? How do we explain to them that there are dangers that are involved, that is there, but we all can manage together? And of course, I will give some ideas after this. Is that okay?
Sure, fantastic. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yipei has a questions asking about how do we know that we are actually in fear and anxiety mode?
Okay.
How do we measure?
Pay attention to your body. Your body will always leak how you are feeling. Okay, as I say, when we work with people who suffer from phobias, that's the extreme form of stress, a high fear of something. So when I work with people who are fears of cockroaches, snakes, or whatever, presentations, you have to do a presentation in front of a class, students who have that sense of fear of giving a presentation. Yeah, you will find that among other things, you will suffer from what we call palpitations. Your heart will start beating a little faster, and you might be just watching the TV, you're watching something on Netflix, and out of the blues, your heart starts to just palpitate, and you don't know why. Just that's what we call the onset of a panic attack. Shortness of breath, hands sweaty, yeah. You start to shiver and shake. Don't know why. Those are all indicators of a panic attack happening, right? So a lower form of a panic attack is when there's a sense of anxiety that is starting to build up. It's the same, when you feel yourself sweaty, shortness of breath, heart beating, and you're just wondering what is it when you are thinking about something pay attention to what you are thinking about before those symptoms begin to happen. So the first indicator of how we feel always, just before we start to feel something, is our bodies. Our bodies will respond. Yeah, there are things that are happening in our minds that will trigger off certain mechanisms in our brain to let the body respond in such a way against, let's say, for fight or flight, right? So pay attention to those little symptoms happening within the body that is giving you a sense that there's something not right. Yeah. And if it's an issue of stress, pay attention to the sweaty fingers, to the palpitations, to the shortness of breath, to the irritability levels that you have, and as I said, check to see whether there's certainly something wrong with you physically first, or whether there's something that's going on in your mind just before those things came in. Yeah, it's paying attention to become aware of our thoughts before the onset of those physical symptoms. Yeah.
Jerry, this is Raymond again.
Yep.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I have a question. I suppose what we're going through now, being cooped up at home, is something like what we call cabin fever, right?
Cabin fever. Would you like to explain your understanding of cabin fever?
Because the fact that we are unable to really venture out so much and stuck at home, and this has become the new normal for us, and it's just that we are not accustomed to it. We are still adjusting, and it may take some time. And the uncertainty of not knowing when this is going to end. Is it 2 weeks? Is it 1 month? Is it 3 months? That is that's eating into us. Am I right to say it like that? The fear of the unknown, as you said.
So two things happening there, Raymond. One is what we call future shock. You're just finding up a term by one of my favorite authors, whose name is suddenly Alvin Toffler. Okay, Alvin Toffler, future shock, and Toffler talks about the idea that modern society, because of the pace of change and the intensity of the pace of change, that change happens so fast, even before COVID-19. Happens so fast that before we can adapt to the change, using technology as a classic example, before we can even get used to our handphones, a new model, new version, before we can get used to a certain kind of software, a new software comes up, and we are constantly like now, online learning. Teachers, most of my teachers would not have, done this before in our lectures in the university, but within a few days, we all had to become masters, experts at doing online learning. Our training didn't prepare us for this. We all knew how to, load up things every week. We used to do that, but not do live quality online teaching, that is live. So the pace of change is so fast that before we can adapt to the change, the future is already onto us. And that's what then creates this sense of anxiety and panic because of the pace of change, right? And so we didn't really get time to psychologically, physically, even sometimes prepare ourselves for this situation. Businesses didn't have the time to prepare. Our medical services didn't have, across the world, that's the news that you're hearing all the time in the US. They didn't have the time, even though they had the blueprint 6-7 years ago. In 2014 to prepare for a pandemic like this, but they didn't do it for whatever reason. And same thing with us, we just didn't give ourselves the time, or didn't have the time to adapt to that change. And so when human beings can't, don't have the time to do that, then when the future comes, that raises the level of anxiety. So Toffler used the term future shock to talk about it's just like culture shock. You go to a new culture, you all your life you've been conditioned to live in a certain way. Suddenly you go to the new culture, people live differently. Shock, it's just a shock to the system. It's the same. The future is on us. It's a shock to the system. Number one. The good news is we are a species that have survived quite a few thousand years, if not a few, quite a few thousands of years, right? We are a species that is very, very resilient. And we have a species that have evolved through the process of evolution and adaptation. right? When you think about what has happened and how we have adapted to the last 150 years, at no other time in our human history have we changed as much as over the last 150, 200 years of our human history compared to all the time since the beginning of civilization. The good news is we have the ability to adapt. And despite the uncertainty, as long as we are able to tell ourselves new stories within our minds and prepare for the worst and expect the best, hope for the best, prepare for the worst, but hope for the best. That's what often the phrase that is used. When we are able to do that, then we learn to cope. So regardless, my conversations with my principals, my head of departments is this: prepare for June if the MCO is lifted. What are our plans? Worst case scenarios. Prepare for September. What's going to happen if they end until July? The rest of the school term, because that's already what has happened in America now, in Australia, in the UK. They already stopped education, schooling, the school term right until October for universities. In America, all schools have been shut until the end of the school year already, even though they still had another 2-3 months more to go, right? So just preparing for the worst and hoping for the best. That if it doesn't, then we already have our plans in place. So we try to manage as much as possible some sense of control still in our decision making, and that's what will help us adapt. Yeah, by anticipating as much as possible rather than reacting to the future. Okay.
Okay, Mr. Low, I believe you have a question. Mr. Low, if you can unmute your mic and camera, could you ask the question to Dr. Jerry?
Hey, Dr. Gary, Low here.
Yes, Low.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, my question is this. I look at your discussion earlier on.
Mm-hmm.
Hello?
Yes, I can hear you. Yes, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's about our EQ, because you were relating about all the various type of emotions.
Mm-hmm.
So how would you advise us to build up on our own personal EQ?
Okay. The next slides will do exactly that, Mr. Low. So
yeah. Okay. Good.
So maybe could I move on then, Raymond? Are there any other urgent questions so that I can just move on then to the practical steps of managing our mental health during this period? Is that okay? Okay.
Carry on, Jerry.
Okay, so let me start with this here. The outbreak of the coronavirus is taken from the CDC 2019. May be stressful for some people. Fear and anxiety about a disease can be overwhelming and cause strong emotions in adults and children. However, coping with stress will make you, the people you care about, and your community stronger. So something positive that we don't shy away from stress. If it doesn't kill you, maybe a lot of sayings, it will make you stronger, right? So, as I said, and this connects with Mr. Low's question, because the origins of an emotional episode is in our thought process, whether we are aware or not aware of that thought process. Yeah, and remember that anxiety is a future pace. Remember how I define anxiety? It's a perceived threat, to my physical or psychological well-being or to that of my significant others. And therefore, the threat hasn't happened yet. It may happen, may not happen, I don't know. Yeah, I do not need to make in my mind the threat to be 100% will happen, because we also know what people who have come into contact with the virus doesn't necessarily mean that they will get the virus. Doctors can't explain that. Some people have stronger resistance. Some people have already natural antibodies for whatever the reason. Yeah. So we mustn't assume the threat to be 100% real. Yeah. Okay. So because, but I'm not saying it is not. What I'm just saying is simply that it hasn't happened yet. That's a future event that we see happening. Okay? And because it's a future event, what we need to do is to rein in our thoughts, pull in the over planning and over anticipation of something happening. Yeah, because we also know from the principle of self-fulfilling prophecy, if we keep repeating to ourselves over and over and again, the downside of the self-fulfilling prophecy is very likely we will move ourselves to behave in such a way for the prophecy to actually happen, for better or for worse. So I won't go into that, but just be mindful. Yeah, overly anticipating just heightens the stress, and that's a future-paced event. Anxiety, fears are future-paced event. Therefore, the first step to managing anxiety is bringing your mind back to the present. What is real? Present means it's real. Huh? The only thing that is real is this moment I'm speaking to you, not what happened at 11 o'clock when I started the session. 52 minutes have gone, right? But 8 minutes from now at 12 o'clock, that hasn't happened yet. What I need to just remind myself is, if I realize that I've got this tendency to over anticipate, and when I find that the stresses are quite overwhelming, first thing, manage the thoughts. How do we manage the thought? First point is bring me back to the present. So when we work with people with phobias, when we work with people with phobias, for example, and if you happen to have this particular phobia that I'm going to talk about, please take note of your reactions to it. And please give me your contact so that we will lead you through to de-stress with a phobia, because I've raised the example. So if you work with people who have a phobia, let's just say of cockroaches, right? Or any other phobia for that matter. In our mind, if I'm confronted with what I fear the most, it's the end of the world. We become numb, we become paralyzed. All treatments of phobia will begin with bringing someone through a state of what we call relaxation. Starting off first with that, that's what we call, either it's systematic desensitization, whether it's, we visualize that, or we put ourselves in an actual situation, but learn to be calm in that actual situation, face to face with what we fear the most. Because you cannot be anxious and peaceful at the same time. It's like water and oil, cannot be at the same time. So focusing your mind to the present. So mindfulness is this whole idea of becoming aware of where you are at the moment you feel anxious. Just become aware of your surroundings of that moment, right? And on the slide that I'm showing you, there are simple ways of doing this. You can just Google how to practice mindfulness, and it comes to you. Yeah, you don't have to sit in a meditative stand, yoga-like stand for 30 minutes, 40 minutes. It can just be a 5-10 minutes exercise. If we had time, normally in a face-to-face workshop, I will actually lead people to simply learn how to breathe. That's how we focus our minds to the present, just becoming aware of our breathing. And the step before becoming aware of your breathing is becoming aware of what's happening to your body. Becoming aware of your body, and then taking deep breaths, counting to 6 to 8 each time. Breathe in up to 8, hold up to 8, and let go through a count of 8. Yeah, if you can't hold it so long, do it at a count of 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Hold 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, just doing this, and then just focusing on the moment now, and you will notice your anxieties beginning to ease up. Right? So the practice of mindfulness, I hope that answers Mr. Lowe's question somewhat. Because anxiety, again, is a future pace. Mindfulness is a present, becoming aware of your present. Yeah, don't keep your mind from wandering and going ahead of yourself. Another thing, this is another part of cognitive change. Yeah, because what creates the fear is the perception that things are worse. And I mentioned that people who are normally type A, have a high need for control, etc., perfectionists, they tend to be more, they tend to have a deeper experience of anxiety. Yeah, so if the origins are in our thinking, then change the way we think, right? So from catastrophizing, this is the end. One of the things we have learned from human history, how bad things are, it could always be worse. As long as I have life, I have hope. So simple example that comes to mind immediately. Second World War. At the end of the Second World War, the experts around the world, the economic experts, were saying that's the end of Japan. You know, they will never recover. 30 years down the road, they were the next, the greatest economic power after the US. Yeah, sometimes it takes a little longer, but human history shows that you talk about different kinds of organizations that we have. Okay, Tony Fernandez, once his hit, he grounded all his fleet of 200. It says we are no more an airlines. We are now going to be a digital company, right? Air Asia. And Tony Fernandez, you know, will always tell his stories when he talked about the origins of Air Asia. He says we started with 2 airlines. We went on to become having 200 in our fleet. But now what has happened? We just have to retell a different story. So no matter how bad things are, things could be worse. As long as we have life, human history tells us we have hope, right? So we need to just be mindful with not catastrophizing things that happen, and always put perspective and context when I'm starting to feel anxious. Yeah, no matter how bad things are, it could be worse. And so because it is not yet the worst, I have scope, I have opportunity to make things better. Another one is, one of the things, just see the difference in the term. This is a phrase coined by a famous cognitive psychologist called Albert Ellis. And you look at how masturbating is spelled here, different from M-A-S. This is M-U-S-T, right? This is for people who have this high, according to Ellis, this high need for perfection. Must be in absolute control of everything in their lives, in their environment, in the way the children think, the family must operate, etc., etc., etc. Level of cleanliness must be perfect. But in this time, you know, when you are in this enclosed space and people are already so stressed everywhere, sometimes this, you know, we don't have that level of control as we would like to. And he says, so Alice says the only difference, what is similar between this masturbating and the other one with MAST, is that it has the propensity, or it has the ability to just abuse ourselves. We only abuse ourselves when we demand that the world must be like this. We demand that people have to behave in the way that I want them to behave. We demand. So we make demands of ourselves and the other people that are so unrealistic, even in everyday life, even without being in this enclosed space. And when we do that, well, now that we find ourselves in this and we don't have the control of being able to move about as freely as we want, etc., where, you know, maybe in the past it would only happen in the workplace when it becomes a problem, but now in the house becomes a problem because I find it so difficult to live with this person. My children will say it's so difficult to live with my papa. He's always so demanding on us. Yeah, and then it just adds on more stress. So, you know, versus must be, they must end, the schools must behave this way, the teachers have to be like this, the children, my students have to be like this. It would be nice, like, it would be nice. It would be nice. Yeah, some amount of allowing human beings to you know, encourage them to be the best that they can be, rather than just, you know, whipping them all the time using the stick. So sometimes it teaches us people management. So changing that way of thinking from a very rigid to a more adaptable, flexible way helps us to then look for adaptable, flexible solutions also to our everyday lives. Another one is, you know, another set of thoughts, yeah. These thoughts come from people who have what we call low frustration tolerance. Even before COVID-19 already, very impatient, low frustration. I can't stand it, I can't stand it, I can't stand it. And people try to shake my hands and I can't stand it. You know, oftentimes when people tell me I can't stand it, I just say, then sit now, sit. You know, I can't stand, I can't stand, sit, so sit. I mean, we are tougher than we think we are. You know, so because of this low frustration tolerance, we don't have very much patience. And in doing that now, at a time when we really have to be patient, and a time when, you know, the phrase is just stay at home, I can't stand it. I can't stand it. So what to do? Lie down maybe, and that might help a little bit. Breathe. Yeah. But I'm tougher than I think I am. So learning how to be, the word now is resilient. Yeah. How do I learn to become resilient? I can become resilient when I start looking at the strengths, resources that I've had in my life, in my past, where I've overcome obstacles upon obstacles upon obstacles and use that as evidence. Yeah, use that as evidence that I am capable, I am able, I am adept, I am stronger, tougher than I imagine myself to be. So even if we lose our business, and that's a reality for many people, even though I'm out of a job, when you put 1 and 3 together, yes, now is the time for me to use my fear and use the fear as a data point for me. What is it I'm fearful most? And then logically trying to minimize my emotions, work through creative ideas and solutions for me to look at a new direction after all of this is over. Use this time to start planning for my life beyond MCO, beyond COVID-19. Don't try and imagine, if I have time, I will talk about it afterwards. Don't try and imagine yourself going back to the way things are, because things will not be the same ever again. And those who are able to adapt, they will be the ones to come back faster after the MCO. Okay, so I hope that certainly gives us something to think about. So other than the thoughts, now let's go to the emotions. How do we deal with our emotions? I mean, we talk about the volcano model of emotions. There are 2 types now. Some people deal with emotions by keeping it within themselves. Keep all emotions now. After a while, cannot tahan anymore already. Explosion, the volcanic eruption, and then you have people splattered on the wall, right? Like the Incredible Hulk. We want to avoid those 2 extremes. Part of being emotionally intelligent requires us to learn, number 1, to become aware of my emotions. Healthy emotional engagement. And now I have the opportunity. Now I have the opportunity with my children, with my spouse, to start learning how to process emotions in a healthy way. Especially now, I assume that my audience are all adults, and even if you are not yet an adult, but a student, you are a secondary school student, right? Learning how to deal with emotions very much has got a family script. If you look at the different theories of family systems, where we learn how we learn to work with emotions very much comes from the way our parents engaged us with this. If we come from a generation, I come from that generation, you don't talk about emotion. My father was a very, very stoic person, right? And he wasn't very good with emotions, but I knew somewhere but when he used to write letters to me towards the end of his life, when things happened to him, and he learned to get in touch with himself a little bit more, because he had a near-death experience with a massive heart attack. In those days, they didn't have a open heart surgery in the 60s, 70s. And after that, when he came out and when he used to write to me when I was away from home, he shared some of his deepest feelings, something he never was able to do before because of the nature of who he was, right? Because of the family that he came from. And so, my mother, on the other hand, was a very talk about everything kind of person, yeah. Very, very, engages people very emotionally to the other extreme. And so how we manage these emotions really has its historical roots in our family systems, family upbringing. And if we want ourselves and our children now, using the opportunity of being in an enclosed space, it's to process healthy emotional engagements, we need to start talking about this. Don't keep it in, especially at a time where things are already very, very stressful. And if people don't talk about how they feel, and learning how to talk about how they feel is important, right? And often people are not so open to us talking about how they feel because we don't know how to express how we feel. Yeah. So after this talk, some people say, "Oh, I heard the speaker talk about express my." So I'm going to tell my children, "Y'all, I tell you already, you don't know." So the way we express the emotion comes across as I'm reprimanding my children. So I let go. I catharsis. So number C, you see catharsis. I catharsis. I feel so much lighter now that I've told you how I feel in a very aggressive way. But then I've passed on my burden onto my children and my spouse, who then will take it out on the furniture, on the cat in the house. That's not what we are talking about. Yeah, but learning how to sit down and express. Take ownership, number one, for the way I feel. I am feeling this. I need your help to help me through this. I've not been coping with my these feelings of anxiety. I'm worried about what's going to happen to me after this MCO is done, etc., etc. And you'll find, you'll find that the people around us, will also, come and rally around us, because human beings have this ability, isn't it, to empathize, to reach out. So healthy emotional engagements begin with being aware of that, learning how to accept my emotions, that expressing emotions it's not a sign of weakness, unlike how we used to perceive in our Asian culture, and learning, therefore, after that, how to express it in a way that is healthy, without damaging us or the people around us. Okay, let me go very, very quickly, because I'm just mindful of the time. We will go on until about 12:15 or so. Is that okay, Raymond?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. This next slide, I'm not going to go through every single point, but I just want to highlight certain key slides, in terms of what will ideas that we can do to help us manage during this MCO period. Number one, so other than my thoughts and my emotions, the third thing is setting, a structure for me every day when I get up. And why is setting up some kind of a structure, whether I'm a student, whether I'm a homemaker, whether I'm a teacher, whether I'm a worker in the office, whether I'm an agent. Structure helps give me a sense of normalcy. Yeah. Some people are not very good at that. They need the confines of a workspace, the office space to drive them. But it is really necessary, that the sense of normalcy, because if you don't set the structure, then this becomes a very, very unnatural kind of environment. But setting a structure and trying to replicate my workplace is just that now my workplace is now my home. This is now my new workplace, and it might be for a couple of weeks more, right? It helps some sense of normalcy. And if I can plan then for what I'm going to do tomorrow, it gives me a sense of purpose, direction, meaning in what I am going to do each day, right? Many years ago, there was another famous psychologist called Viktor Frankl. Frankl was a survivor of the German concentration camp. And, just try to imagine a situation if you are, certainly his situation was a lot more desperate than ours, yeah? And he eventually, when he survived the horrors of the concentration camp, he wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning. And just try to imagine what is life like in a concentration camp. Every moment of the day, you have trainloads of people coming in. As people get off the train, immediately life and death choices are made. One group of people will go directly to the factories where they are burned, when they are gassed and they are burned, and the ashes of that will fall on you 24 hours of the day. The factories and the trains will be coming in. And then you, as a prisoner there, you will go on those long marches. You don't know, life is cheap. Somebody will finger you, whether it's the fellow prisoner, whether it's a German guard, accuse you of anything. If they wanted to accuse, they will just shoot you, because your life means nothing. You are lower than a human being as far as they are concerned. What would keep a person alive? What would give a person meaning in his life in a situation like this? Yeah. For Frankl, what kept him alive? What kept him going? What kept him still wanting to hold on to life and trying to create his own meaning? Was the idea that maybe when all of this is over, he might be reconciled with his wife and his child, his family. He didn't know, it didn't matter to him whether they were alive or dead at this time. But that was the thought, just holding on to a thought, no matter how unrealistic it might be, whether you know it or not. Just holding on to a thought that gives meaning. Because as I said right from that first slide, we respond to things in terms of the meaning that we give to an event that happens out of us. So meaning making is critical during a time like this. And therefore, allowing ourselves to understand and to create meaning that we have every day in our lives is what then will help us through every day of being in an enclosed space. Every day when dealing with disappointments and frustrations and failures, finding new ways to create meaning. The German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche, he came up with a very nice phrase that is often quoted: he who has a why can deal with any what or how. However, whatever happens in life, as long as you have a why, a reason for your existence, you can deal with whatever comes. So setting this structure very much links with those philosophical existential ideas of meaning. We have to create meaning, new meanings in our lives, regardless of our life's circumstances. And that's something important to think about. Set aside time. We spend a lot of time on our Malaysian roads getting to work. I know some people leave the house at 6 o'clock so that, if they are coming from Klang going to KL to work, they don't have to get caught in traffic. When you think about the number of hours every time when I go to and from work, I spend more than an hour, 2 hours sometimes on the road. And, it takes up so much time. Now that we are at home, the time that we save from traveling, use that time to do other things, right? Spend your 8 hours at work, certainly, but after that, switch off your devices. Work-life balance is certainly very important. Manage your children, screen time, all of those things are very important. But the additional time that we save from traveling, use that time to develop a new set of skills. Do an online course, help you, to help you return to work, cook, paint, do anything in the arts and the humanities that you always wanted to do, but obviously no time. But now we have time. We have time. From the time that we use from traveling that we normally now don't need to do, right? Another critical thing, take care of your physical health. I don't need to overemphasize that. That is so critical, okay? Now, another thing to remember when we talk about now the next aspect of managing our life, not just from a personal aspect, but from an interpersonal family aspect, and you're living in an enclosed space with different people. If you have a family, right, we are living with, and this would be for parents who are in the audience at the moment, or who are with your partner at this point in time. Just bear in mind that different people respond to stresses and fears and anxiety differently. Whether we are very young, whether we're old, whether people you think you know them, but all of us have different ways of coping with stress and fears and anxieties. Yeah, and how they respond, of course, as I mentioned, will very much depend on many things going on in their lives. Some people who are more predisposed to the disease will obviously be more afraid. If you have elderly parents living with you, yeah, or if your elderly parents are not living with you, but they are not within easy access for you, then of course you worry for them even more, right? People with pre-existing mental health problems will be also more susceptible, because in an enclosed space, this becomes heightened. The stress and anxiety gets heightened. Children, teenagers, they deal with stress differently. You just have to watch the news. Teenagers, especially the spring break, they think that they are, typical of teenagers. They will overcome whatever challenges life throws at them and become risk takers. That's the term we use for adolescents. They are risk takers. But now, so they deal with stress quite differently. Yeah? They cope very differently. And people who are helping with the response, every day when you're confronting the first people who are on the first line of defense, our healthcare workers, etc., people who are working in the grocery stores, every day you're coming into contact with people, and you worry, whether you yourself will get it. And if you have someone working in that industry, or who are heroes at this point in time, helping those who are very, very sick with the virus, they worry about their loved ones going to work every day. So different people will respond to this very differently, and therefore we need to be mindful of that. And therefore, first thing when it comes to relationships is learning how to respect the space, set up boundaries, be clear. Reorganize your house a little bit so that you have different workspaces in your house. For where you will have your own work meetings, your children will study, where they will play. Just respecting the space and having a conversation among the family members in a way that says, okay, when we are in this space, this is what we will do, right? Setting those boundaries really as much as possible for whatever space that we find ourselves in. It's important to just, because we all do need some time, for ourselves. Whenever we are with other people, even when we are with other people, we still need a bit of time for ourselves to do the things that we need to do to help us keep sane. Get creative with connections. You see loads of this. People send us some very nice, humorous, funny things. Different ways lah. We can still have our own online party, group music session. I like, there was a video that was going viral about this school or this class, music class. They still had their music class, and about 15, 20 of them doing a cappella session, and it was so nice, so heartwarming, so nice to see these people trying to just get some sense of normalcy. Yeah, reach out to friends. Sometimes if we have trouble working with very, very young children because our school is got an online um, program for our children, but we also have work that we have to do. But our friend who may have a bit more time, then get your friend to come in and help support your child, help for you for a period of time, so that you can also either catch up with your work or get some rest, and then vice versa. When she needs help, she can reach out to you, and you can support her then. So reaching out to friends to extend a hand of help also is very useful. Family fun night. I used to have this with my kids when they were quite young. One day a week, Saturday night, we'll have bring out the board games, turn off technology, do all sorts of nice, interesting, funny things. I've given you 2 links there that you can just watch by yourself. Yeah, some interesting ideas, and YouTube has loads and loads and loads of them. So look for fun, creative ways to come together during this time, do things that are different outside of the normal routine, and that you, let's face it, normally would never even think of doing if we didn't have MCO. But now is a good time to also build family relationships. Yeah? This is Farah's question. So support your young children, talk to them, answer questions, share facts with the child in a way that they can understand. Okay, so how do you talk to your child to reassure them? Number one, why they can't go out. Reassure them that they are safe, and tell them if they are upset because they can't play with their friends, it's okay. It's okay. Mommy will understand, right? Tell them how you deal with your own stress. That this is also affecting you. How do you deal with them? How are you, what helps you to cope with this stress? Teach them simple breathing exercises, the mindfulness activity. They can sit and join you with this, yeah. And then you can keep an eye open to see whether children can be very compliant. Sometimes they're at the stage where they're so cute, they're very compliant, they're breathing, they will follow you exactly, yeah, because mommy says this, mommy does this, I follow. Okay, so doing some of this different things that we have with them, um, like in kindergarten, kindergarten teachers will always talk about time. They teach the concept of time through talking about different moments in the day when they will do different things. So it's playtime, it's reading time, it's meal time, it's bath time, etc. So doing what kindy teachers will actually do in the home. You're now a kindy teacher to your very young kid, and you can now empathize with how difficult it is, for kindy teachers having to spend times with very young children, 25 kids sometimes in the class, yeah. And give them the opportunity to connect with their friends. If you know their friends, their classmates, get them online to just chat, just play some online games together with them. All of those little things, I hope will help answer Farah's questions. If doesn't, Farah, please feel free to jump in after we are done. At the community level, and I'm going to finish very soon already. At the community level, I had a friend, a classmate, sixth form classmate. I was so proud of him the other day. He shared something on his Facebook page where his company raised funds, and they were distributing gloves and suits and sanitizers, distributing it to 2 different hospitals to the healthcare workers that were there, right? And this was a donation from his company. So a sense that sometimes getting out of ourselves, taking the attention away, the focus away from our own fears and anxiety, focusing on the needs of other people, because as I say, it could be worse. Other people are in a worse situation that we are in. That keeps our mind away from constantly ruminating, obsessing about the fear over and over again. Yeah, keeping ourselves active. All of those are ways in which we will be able to reduce the levels of stresses and anxieties that we face, and especially when we feel a sense of a sense of our ability to contribute to the lives of other people who are in a far worse situation than we are in the front lines of the fight against the virus. Yeah, it gives us a sense of purpose, meaning all of those things that will help us work through these feelings of fears and anxiety that we have, and manage it. Okay. And finally, let me just end with this. If those of you, after this talk and you want to reach out to us, please. We have a center for counseling and psychological services called CPCS. We are in the process of trying to offer online services, online counseling services for those who need it. There are 2 contact points there. You can either email us or you can visit our web page and sign up, and someone will get in touch with you to see how we can offer you some help and support. Yeah. Thank you very much, everyone, and keep well and keep safe. Yeah, thank you. Raymond?
Hi, Jerry. There's someone to ask a question. William, could you please direct Ms. YY, I think, to ask a question?
Okay, this question was posed by Cheong YY. She say, if I caught between 2 people who is emotionally affected